The hushed stillness of Gate 27B at Ronald Reagan Washington National Airport shattered as Bethany Williams stormed toward Michael Anderson and his son, her leopard print bag swinging dangerously close to Ethan's headphones. The terminal's fluorescent lights caught the glint of her excessive gold jewelry, matching the intensity of her meticulously crafted orange-blonde updo. "I couldn't help but notice you have first-class seats," Bethany announced, voice carrying across the terminal like a foghorn cutting through mist. Her burgundy lipstick twisted into what she probably thought was a persuasive smile as her eyes darted between their boarding passes. It's completely inappropriate for a teenager to be sitting in first class when there are adults who would actually appreciate the upgrade. What Bethany couldn't possibly understand was just how much Michael Anderson had survived before reaching this particular crossroads. As a decorated Army Ranger turned child psychologist, Michael had fought battles on distant battlefields and later in sterile courtrooms to adopt Ethan after his best friend Sarah's death from breast cancer 3 years ago. This first-class upgrade wasn't some frivolous luxury. It represented a year of meticulous planning, saving airline miles from speaking engagements across the country where he educated other psychologists about working with neurodivergent children. For 16-year-old Ethan, the extra space of first class wasn't a privilege. It was a necessity. His autism made the sensory onslaught of air travel nearly unbearable. The constant brushing of strangers in narrow aisles, the unpredictable noises, the feeling of being trapped in a small space with nowhere to retreat when overwhelmed. Michael had learned this the hard way during their first flight together, when Ethan had experienced a complete meltdown in economy class, leading to judgmental stares and whispered comments that only intensified his distress. "Ma'am," Michael began, his voice measured and calm despite the bubble of protective anger rising within him. "These seats were purchased with miles I've accumulated specifically for my son's needs." "He needs," Bethany interrupted with a dismissive wave of her hand. "He looks perfectly fine to me. He's just playing video games. My daughter actually deserves to experience first class." Michael took a deep breath, employing the same techniques he taught his young clients. "My son has autism spectrum disorder. Air travel is extremely challenging for him due to sensory processing issues." Watching his son's familiar signs of distress, fingers gripping his game console, breathing becoming shallow, Michael felt that protective instinct surge. Before he could respond further, Bethany did something unforgivable. She reached past him and physically touched Ethan's shoulder. "Sweetie," she said in that condescending, syrupy voice adults often use when manipulating children, "you'd be happy to give my daughter your seat. Wouldn't you nice boys share? Don't they?" The effect was immediate. Ethan's headphones fell askew. His breathing quickened, hands beginning the repetitive flapping motion that signaled severe distress. Small, distressed sounds escaped his throat, the precursor to what Michael recognized as an imminent meltdown. In that moment, Michael Anderson transformed into the protector Ethan needed. Drawing himself to his full height, he stepped decisively between Bethany and his son. "Do not touch my son again," he said, voice low but carrying unmistakable authority. "Back away now." Has someone ever judged your family without knowing your story? Follow Heart Stories for more powerful tales of families fighting for dignity in a world that doesn't always see them clearly. Bethany Williams wasn't merely an irritated traveler seeking an upgrade. As she shifted her designer purse and angled her phone to capture Michael's face, a spark of recognition flashed in her eyes. "You're that psychologist." Bethany's voice dropped to a theatrical whisper that somehow projected even further across the terminal than her previous demands. "The one who testified about gay parents being just as capable at that congressional hearing last year." Her lips curled into a smile that never reached her eyes. "And now you're dragging this poor, confused boy around, claiming special treatment because of his condition. He looks perfectly fine to me." The pieces clicked into place for Michael. 6 months ago, he had indeed testified before a congressional committee on a bill related to adoption rights for LGBTQ+ individuals. The hearing had been broadcast on C-SPAN, and clips had circulated on social media, particularly among conservative circles who opposed the legislation. As one of the few openly gay adoptive fathers who was also a child development expert, his testimony had drawn both support and vitriol. Michael maintained his composure, though his jaw tightened. The confrontation had just evolved from a simple case of entitlement to something far more targeted. After a year of saving airline miles from cross-country speaking engagements about inclusive therapy practices, after navigating the complex legal system that nearly denied him custody of his best friend's son, after countless nights helping Ethan through sensory meltdowns, this woman dared to question not just their need for accommodation, but their very legitimacy as a family. So, Williams, Michael said, deliberately using her name to signal that he, too, recognized her. My son's medical needs and our family structure are not up for public debate. Please step back and leave us alone. Bethany's eyebrows shot up at hearing her name. Behind her, her teenage daughter, who had been trying desperately to disappear into her hoodie, looked up with minute, mortified eyes. Fine. How do you know my name? Bethany demanded, camera still rolling. Because you're Bethany Williams from the Family Values Coalition. Michael replied evenly. You were at the same hearing where I testified, representing the opposition. You called families like mine experiments that put children at risk. Murmurs rippled through the nearby passengers, some of whom had begun recording the interaction on their own phones. This wasn't just a random airport dispute anymore. It had the charged atmosphere of a cultural confrontation playing out in public. Ethan's fingers began their familiar flapping motion, his breathing becoming more labored as Bethany continued her tirade. The Bible is clear about what makes a real family. This isn't natural, and you're using this boy as your prop. She gestured toward Ethan's noise-canceling headphones and Nintendo Switch. He doesn't need special treatment. He needs discipline and a proper family structure. Behind Bethany, her daughter Ashley took a tentative step forward. Mom, please, she whispered. You are making a scene. For the first time, Michael noticed what he had missed before. Partially hidden under the lapel of Ashley's jacket was a small rainbow pin, positioned where it could be easily covered if necessary. A silent rebellion against her mother's crusade. Bethany whipped around. Be quiet, Ashley. This isn't about you. She turned back to Michael, raising her phone higher. I'm documenting this discrimination against traditional families. My 40,000 followers will want to know how Bennett Airlines prioritizes so-called special needs over decent folks who follow God's design for families. Michael leaned down to Ethan's eye level, ignoring Bethany entirely. You're safe, buddy. Remember our breathing technique? 4 counts in, hold for 7, 8 counts out. His voice remained steady, a lighthouse in Ethan's gathering storm. Understanding neurodiversity meant recognizing that meltdowns weren't tantrums, but neurological responses to overwhelming environments, a distinction Bethany Williams had no interest in learning. Look at this performance, Bethany narrated to her phone. Using this poor boy for sympathy points when all I'm asking for is basic fairness. My daughter Ashley deserves that first-class seat. She has a 4.0 GPA and volunteers at church every Sunday. A middle-aged woman sitting nearby finally stood up. Ma'am, I think you should leave that family alone. Her voice wavered slightly, but she stood firm. The young man clearly has special needs, and you're making things worse. Bethany rounded on this unexpected challenger. Special needs, that's what they all say now. When I was growing up, kids behaved because their parents knew how to raise them properly. 2 parents, a mother and a father, the way God intended. In that moment, Michael wasn't just protecting his son from a belligerent stranger. He was standing against every system that had tried to tell them they weren't a real family. Every voice that had questioned his ability to parent simply because of who he loved. Every obstacle that had been placed in their path from the day he'd first applied for adoption. Jason Rivera appeared as if materializing from thin air, his Navy uniform pressed to perfection, silver wings catching the terminal's fluorescent lights as he moved with purposeful strides toward the escalating confrontation. At 6 feet tall with broad shoulders that spoke of military discipline, his calm authority immediately commanded attention. Ma'am, I need you to lower your phone immediately. Jason said, his tone professional, yet firm. Recording other passengers without consent violates our privacy policy and creates an unsafe environment in our terminal. When Bethany attempted to interrupt with protestations about her rights to free speech, Jason raised his hand slightly. I need to see everyone's boarding passes, please. Michael silently handed over their documents, while Bethany rummaged dramatically through her leopard print bag, certain the airline representative would validate her entitlement. The terminal had grown eerily quiet as passengers watched the confrontation's resolution unfold. Even Ethan had momentarily stabilized, his anxiety slightly eased by the introduction of clear authority and structure to the chaotic situation. Jason examined both sets of boarding passes, nodding thoughtfully before looking up. Mr. Anderson and Ethan are confirmed for seats 2A and 2B, first-class accommodation purchased with frequent flyer miles earned through verified travel. His voice carried just enough for nearby passengers to hear. Ms. Williams, you and your daughter are assigned to 28E and 28F in economy. He returned the boarding passes with professional courtesy. Our airline has clear policies regarding seat assignments and accommodations for passengers with disabilities. Those policies are non-negotiable. Bethany's face flushed crimson. This isn't about disabilities, it's about fairness. That boy is playing video games. He doesn't need special treatment. And that man isn't even his real father. A flash of recognition crossed Jason's face as he looked more closely at Michael. Captain Anderson, 75th Ranger Regiment. Jason extended his hand. Staff Sergeant Rivera served under Colonel Matthews in Afghanistan, 2011 to 2013. The two men shook hands, an unspoken bond forming instantly between former comrades. I thought you looked familiar, Michael said, relief evident in his voice at finding an unexpected ally. Jason nodded. The name caught my attention when I saw the passenger manifest. Didn't realize it was you until now. He glanced briefly at Ethan. I understand completely why first-class accommodation is necessary in this situation. Then something unexpected happened. Ethan, who had been silent throughout the confrontation, removed his headphones with trembling hands. The effort this took was visible in his rigid posture and averted gaze. He is my real dad, he said, voice quiet but steady. He saved me when nobody else would. The words came out haltingly, each one a mountain climbed. Ethan rarely spoke to strangers, and never in high-stress situations like this. Michael's eyes widened in surprise. In 3 years together, this was perhaps the most significant moment of Ethan's emotional development, choosing to engage in an overwhelming social situation because something mattered enough to overcome his profound anxiety. A ripple of murmurs spread through the waiting area. The middle-aged woman who had spoken up earlier wiped a tear from her eye. An older gentleman stood up, identifying himself as a retired special education teacher. Young man, he addressed Ethan directly but softly, respecting his sensitivity to loud noises. Your father is doing exactly what good parents do, advocating for your needs. Others nodded in agreement, creating an impromptu community of support. Jason turned back to Bethany, his expression now unyielding. Ms. Williams, you have two choices. Return to your assigned waiting area without further disruption, or I can arrange for airport security to escort you from the terminal. Harassment based on family structure or disability status violates both airline policy and federal law. He handed her back her boarding passes. What will it be? In this moment of confrontation, the real lesson wasn't about airline policies, it was about how communities can form in unexpected places to stand against discrimination, how courage can be contagious, and how the speaking truth, even in a whisper, can silence the loudest critic. The hushed interior of the first-class cabin welcomed Michael and Ethan like a sanctuary after the storm of confrontation at Gate 27B. Jason had arranged for them to board early, before the usual chaos of the general boarding process that would have only heightened Ethan's already elevated anxiety levels. As Ethan settled by the window, methodically arranging his headphones, switch, and comfort items in the exact order he preferred, a ritual that helped him regain control after emotional upheaval, Michael noticed Ashley Williams lingering hesitantly in the jetway. She had separated herself from her mother, who was still arguing with another gate agent. "Mr. Anderson." "Ung." Ashley's voice was barely audible, her eyes darting nervously toward the cabin entrance as if fearing her mother might appear at any moment. "I'm really sorry about my mom and she doesn't—" The words caught in her throat, her fingers unconsciously touching the rainbow pin partially hidden beneath her jacket lapel. "I've been trying to tell her that families come in different forms, but she won't listen." Michael recognized in Ashley's face the particular strain of a child caught between their own emerging identity and a parent's rigid expectations. "It's not your responsibility to change her mind, Ashley," Michael said gently. "You just focus on being true to yourself." He reached into his wallet and handed her a business card with his private practice information. "If you ever need resources or someone to talk to, there are support groups for LGBTQ+ youth with parents who struggle to accept them." As Ashley rejoined her mother in the main cabin, Jason slipped into the seat beside them during a quiet moment. "Everything okay here? Can I get either of you anything before takeoff?" Jason nodded with understanding. "My husband Marcus and I have been fostering our nephew with autism for 3 years now," he confided, keeping his voice low to avoid disrupting Ethan. "The systems weren't built for families like ours, were they? Every accommodation feels like a battle." Michael's surprise must have shown on his face because Jason smiled. "What flight attendants have lives too?" His expression grew more serious. "I recognized your name from that congressional testimony last year. You said something that stuck with me, that love and consistency, not gender or orientation, create security for children. That helped Marcus and I push through when the foster system was giving us the runaround." Midway through the flight, Ethan removed his headphones, a rare occurrence in such an overwhelming environment. "Dad," his voice was soft but clear. "I was scared, but I'm glad I said something. Was that okay?" Michael felt his throat tighten with emotion. "More than okay, buddy. I'm incredibly proud of you." It was the first time Ethan had ever publicly defended their family. "That lady was wrong about us, wasn't she?" Ethan asked, his fingers still moving rhythmically across the armrest. A self-soothing behavior. "About you not being my real dad." "Completely wrong," Michael assured him. "Family isn't just about who you're born to. It's about who shows up for you, who understands you, who loves you exactly as you are." Ethan nodded slowly, processing this. "Like how Mom asked you to be my dad if anything happened to her, because you already understood me better than anyone else." The mention of Sarah, Ethan's biological mother and Michael's best friend since college, brought a familiar pang of grief. She had known her cancer was terminal and had made arrangements for Michael to adopt Ethan, knowing he was one of the few people who truly understood her son's needs. As the plane began its descent into Chicago, Jason made an announcement that wasn't part of the standard script. "Ladies and gentlemen, Bennett Airlines celebrates diverse families and travelers of all abilities. Our commitment to creating inclusive spaces isn't just company policy, it's human decency." The cabin erupted in spontaneous applause. Ethan covered his ears at the sudden noise, but he was smiling a rare, genuine smile that reached his eyes. In that moment, Michael realized something profound. Advocacy wasn't just about fighting against injustice. It was about creating spaces where differences weren't merely tolerated, but celebrated, where accommodations weren't viewed as special treatment, but essential accessibility. 1 week after their confrontation at Gate 27B, Michael received an email from Bennett Airlines. The message contained not only a credit of 50,000 bonus miles, but an invitation to join their newly formed Accessibility Advisory Board. "Your experience highlights why inclusive travel matters." The email read, "We want to build better systems for families like yours." More surprising was the attached message from Jason. Bethany Williams had been required to complete sensitivity training before being allowed to fly with Bennett Airlines again. Meanwhile, her daughter Ashley had joined an online support group for LGBTQ+ teens with conservative parents. The rainbow pin that had been hidden was now proudly displayed on her backpack. The story gained traction after a passenger posted about it online. Soon, Michael's phone was ringing with interview requests from advocacy groups wanting him to speak about the intersection of LGBTQ plus families and disability rights. Ethan, watching his father field these calls, made an unexpected request. "Dad, I want to go with you next time. Maybe I could say something too." His voice was quiet but determined. Not a lot, just something small. 2 months later, they found themselves in San Francisco for Pride weekend. Michael had been invited to speak on a panel about diverse family structures. To his amazement, Ethan agreed to share one sentence at the microphone. "Different families aren't broken, they're just different." And the audience's standing ovation nearly overwhelmed him, but he stood tall, his father's hand on his shoulder. That evening, as they prepared for their flight home first class, once again, Michael received a text from Jason with a photo. It showed Bethany and Ashley Williams volunteering at an LGBTQ plus youth center in Chicago. "People can change," the message read. "Sometimes they just need to see humanity in what they fear." 3 days later, Michael received an email from Ashley Williams herself. "Mr. Anderson, watching you defend your family gave me the courage to finally have an honest conversation with my mom about who I am. She still has a long way to go, but for the first time, she's actually listening instead of just quoting Bible verses at me." As Michael shared the email with Ethan, his son considered it with his characteristic thoughtfulness. "It's like ripples in water," he finally said. "You can't always see where they go." The once frightening experience at Gate 27B had transformed into something neither Michael nor Ethan could have anticipated: a catalyst for change, a platform for advocacy, and most importantly, a profound strengthening of their bond as father and son. Have you ever witnessed a moment where standing up for dignity changed someone's perspective? How might our world transform if we recognize that accommodations aren't special treatment, but essential equality? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and subscribe to Heart Stories for more powerful narratives about families breaking barriers in unexpected places.